first thing I want to do is I'm just going to mist them down with a little bit of sugar water here. And notice that all the bees are sort of clustered to the top of this box. That's sort of a disadvantage for us, because they're right there at the top. When I open this up, they can easily start to walk out. And so what you can do is, now that I've sort of misted them down, I'm going to take this package and just sort of bump it. And of course, if you're the bee at the top that's holding on for dear life with everyone else suspended below you, you lose your grip pretty easily. And so I'm just going to take this, and you can see they all just drop down. Now it exposes more bees for me to mist. And you can also see that the can, and you can see the queen cage suspended. The next thing I'm going to do, I can assure you, is the hardest part of this whole process. And it's getting this can out right here. Because you can see it's basically flush with the top. It's a tight fit. I mean, even with bare hands, I have a hard time. If you've got gloves on, which you should have gloves on if that's what you need to have on to be comfortable, you should be all, Michelin man look if that's what you need to feel comfortable around the bees, because it'll be a more pleasurable experience for you and the bees if you're comfortable in this process. So make sure that you're wearing the clothing that you need to feel comfortable. So I take my hive tool. See that? It's already slipping away. Try and lift it up just a little bit. And slowly pull this out. Now I've got my plate right here to use this if I want for my feeder. So I'll just set that aside. Let me get my queen out of here. This strapping is kind of nice because it actually tears fairly easily. So rather than trying to pop that little staple out, it's easier just to do that. Now, obviously, this is my queen cage. Now, the first thing I want to do, now that I've got my can out and I've got my package open, before I go any further, I want to inspect my queen cage. I want to make sure that she's in there and she's alive and well. It does happen. It's rare, but there are occasions where the queen is dead inside her cage. Typically, it's because there's actually a queen in the package that they missed when they were shaking the bees in there, and they shook a queen in. So the queen that's in here is the queen from that colony, and they've killed her. So I've got my queen cage here, and of course she is well and alive. She's marked in there. I can see her quite nicely. There's a couple of things we want to take note of, and that is this white material here at this end. That is candy, and that candy is what controls the release of the queen. The attendants that are in there with her will chew the candy from the inside out, and once we install this package, these bees that are in the package will eat from the outside in. And it takes them a few to several days to chew through that candy. And during that time, they become acclimated with one another. Her pheromone begins to go through the colony. They realize that they don't have a queen anymore, and so they adopt her as their own if everything goes well. The other thing you want to notice is that there's a hole at this end sealed with a cork, and also a hole at this end that's sealed with a cork. You only want to pull the cork from the candy end. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that.
That would be the end of the candy.
It's the end that's hardest to get out because there's candy there. It's kind of sticky. A hive tool works well, and just sort of gouge it, and there's the cork. Okay, and you can see the candy has now been exposed for the bees to start chewing from the outside in. Okay, so I've got my queen. She's alive and well. I'm just going to keep her here in the shade for a bit. Okay, that is the future of your colony. Treat her well. Okay, so I've got my queen out. I've got my package open, but I've got my wooden plate here. Notice the bees are making their way back up to the top. That's okay. We know how to deal with that now. We can bump them back down. And now, too, with that can of sugar water out, I can also spray down through the opening here to get them good and wet. The sugar water does a couple of things. One is it occupies them because now they're wet, they're licking each other, they're grooming each other. It calms them down, and it also makes them sort of stick together, which makes it a little bit easier to get them out of the package. It also makes it a little easier for you because when I open up this plate, they don't start flying out, rather they start walking, and if we bump them down to the bottom, it actually buys us quite a bit of time. So I'm just going to keep spraying them here a little bit. And at this point, we're approaching the point of no return. We're getting to the point where we're committed to the process. At this point, I can still put the plate on and walk away and catch my breath, collect my nerves. But the next step is to actually get the bees into the box. And once you start that process, you really need to sort of follow it through to completion at that point. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually dump the bees in. I'm going to take a couple of my frames and gently place them in the hive. I don't want to slam them down because I'm going to have a mound of bees down there in the center. If I do, I'm just going to squish them right through my screen bottom board, and that won't be any good for the colony. So I'll gently set them in there with the weight of the frame on their backs. They'll start to walk out to the sides, walk up the frames, and then on my last frame, I'm going to have my queen attached to that frame, and I'm going to install that frame with the queen. Now, when you install your queen, you need to make sure they have access to this screen. If you were to take this screen and put it up against the face of a frame, the bees can't tend to her. Her pheromone won't distribute very easily. So you want to make sure they've got access to that screen. So when you put it on, it goes up against the frame like this with the window screening facing out, candy end up, with the cork from the candy end pulled, not the other one. I put the candy end up because there are attendant bees in here. It's fairly common that one or two of these attendant bees die before the queen is released. And so if that happens, I want those attendant bees to fall down away from the exit rather than falling into the exit hole and obstructing her passage. Okay? So I put the candy end up with that cork from the candy end pulled up against a frame. And you want to make sure that when you attach it to the frame, it's secure so that it doesn't fall down and land face down on the bottom board where they can't get to her, where they can't feed her, where they can't keep her warm. You want to make sure it's secure. There's lots of different ways of doing that. Some people put tiny little nails in the sides like this and just sort of suspend her between two frames. Just make sure you don't drive those nails too deeply and actually, again, obstruct that passageway by having a nail sticking through it. Okay? Some people like to just simply lay her down like this on the bottom board. That's okay, usually, but if it gets cold, sometimes being down there, she may not be as well tended to as if she were actually on a frame. So I like the tried and true attach her to a frame, and I'll show you how I do that. That's where the rubber bands come in. Because this works, now these frames are drawn out with comb, but it works even with foundation. Just take one of these rubber bands, wrap it around the frame, and there's my queen. Nice and secure, okay? Now when you put it on here, if you're using brand new equipment, you're just gonna have a sheet of foundation, so it's gonna be sitting in a little bit more than on the surface of the comb like here. So you wanna make sure that it's down away from this top bar, because if this were just a sheet of foundation and this were up tight against the top bar, it may actually obstruct that that exit hole. So it's sort of centered in the frame like that's fine, and she's ready to go. Okay, so I'll just keep this one aside right here for now. That's how we install our queen. Feeder ready to go. I've sugar watered. I've got my can out. We ready to go? All right. Here we go. We got them sugared up. They're pretty calm. And I'm gonna literally take this package and just dump them in.
You're literally going to dump them in.
Literally.
If I'm gonna panic, that's when I'm gonna do it right there.
Now, I'll tell you, if you try this without gloves, the worst part about it is this little window screening right here sticking you in the hand when you're tapping it like this. But you want to get out as many bees as possible and then set that package down in front like that. Now you can see I've got all the bees mounded up. I don't want to start slamming, got one in my hair too. I don't want to start slamming the frames down, because if I do, I'm going to squish those bees. If you want, you can just sort of give them a little syrup. Here. So if you use the sugar water, you're only going to get the bees that you can actually see.
Okay.
The smoke, when you puff it in there and they start fanning like they're doing now, it gets circulated through the colony. Now, when I put these two frames in, because I've got drawn comb, you can see that it's easy enough for me to sort of block that window screening. So I want to make sure when I put these two in that I leave enough space between and I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap between these two frames, which they may begin to build comb on, but that's okay. I'll clean that up when I come back. There's enough space there now for them to get in between. So now I just want to make sure that I expose my feeder. And I'm going to seal this hive up. Now, we've got an upper entrance here. I want to make sure that I close that upper entrance by putting on my cover, and you'll notice that there's a little bit of back and forth motion. If I slide that all the way forward against that notch, it seals it so they can't use it as an upper entrance. And I want to seal it because I've got a feeder in there, and this is a weak colony, and bees in the area, if those other bees find that feeder, they will come in and try and rob that syrup from this colony, and in doing so, basically kill the colony in the process. So I want to make sure that upper entrance is closed, and that's another reason, too, why I've got my entrance reducer in place. It makes it a little bit easier for the bees to defend themselves. Now, there are a couple bees, and I did a pretty good job here. There aren't many bees left in here. Now, there's a few. I'll just leave this here, and what will happen is, as the day progresses, they'll come on out and into the hive.